Welcome, welcome, come on in. The show's about to begin. Grab your seat and feel the nostalgia grow. Sit tight, relax, and enjoy the ride. We're so glad you're here. Let's go. It's time for Let's Play with AppleMatt.
Mortality in the Old West was pretty high because of diseases and dangerous occupations, and on the average, most folks didn't live much beyond their late 40s. Wyatt and his wife Josie had 2 children, but neither survived childhood. That's why the Undertaker always had a pine box ready to go. Also, having a coffin and a few headstones out front was pretty effective advertising. These here tombstones are blank now, but in a town filled with gunfighters and gamblers and rustlers, they won't stay empty for long. Over time, many of these headstones would carry elaborate mementos of their owners' exploits. One great example is, "Here lies Lester Moore, 4 slugs from a .44. No less, no more." Why, even Tombstone's newspaper was called the Epitaph. You might think the Undertaker's parlor would be a body's last stop before they got buried, but for an outlaw who'd made his last stand, that might not be true. The lawman who'd shot him might just bring him in here to get him fixed up a bit and then take him over to the photographers for a last picture. Many fallen rascals were photographed posthumously in lifelike or deathlike poses. These pictures were nifty trophies for those straight-shooting marshals and deputies, some of whom modestly inserted themselves into the frame. They were also intended to scare off the other bad guys into a lawful and virtuous existence. The Undertaker himself was actually a relatively new arrival in Wyatt Earp's day. Up until that time, the funeral would commonly be handled by the family themselves or by a doctor or even the carpenter who built the coffin. But just when some occupations were starting to disappear, like buffalo hunting, stagecoach driving, undertaking was a whole new wide field of opportunity, particularly, mind you, in any town that old Wyatt happened to live in. As the old saying goes, you can't take it with you, but you can go in style. And style in the Old West was one of these fancy hearse carriages. Some of them cost $8,000 or more and would look right at home in the streets of New York. Truth of the matter is, though, it was only the rich folks that could afford a real fancy funeral. In a rough and tumble kind of town like Tombstone, undertakers were usually kept real busy. They could get mighty tired carting bodies around all day. This here casket on wheels was used kind of like a gurney to move bodies while they were being prepared for burial. Over the years, funerals became more elaborate, and undertakers helped to create the right mood. They started dressing up funeral parlors with black crepe and later added flowers to enhance the proceedings. Even though most light was provided by lanterns and, in bigger cities, gas lamps, these fancy candle holders provided just the right sort of atmosphere. Originally, the word casket meant a container for precious objects. It's where women used to keep their jewels. So, it was only natural that people would want to preserve their most precious loved ones in caskets. I always get nostalgic when I come back here. I see my whole death flashing before my eyes again. Anyway, feel free to pick a few more bones around here. You'll learn more about just what a Western undertaker undertook. There was no more stern reminder of the hereafter than a cross. Sometimes all a preacher had to do was stand next to one. With just one look, he could set folks to thinking about who'd be next, and wondering if they was in good standing with their Maker. As funerals became more and more elaborate, funeral parlors started looking more and more like churches. Some places even had an organ to play somber music while loved ones paid their last respects to the dearly departed. Even though dying is a natural event in life, folks still don't like to be reminded of it. That's why the Undertaker always had a back door. No need to be dragging bodies down Main Street and carting them in the front door. Besides, a lot of the bodies that showed up weren't always in the best shape. Life in the Old West was pretty tough, and undertakers never had a shortage of customers. Most often you could find a pine box just waiting for the next unfortunate soul. In the Old West, each coffin was handmade to the specifications of whoever was going to be buried in it. And looking at this here coffin, either the Undertaker was on his lunch break, or he's fixing to bury a real skinny person. These here are the Undertaker's tools of the trade. Not only did he have to be a bit of a scientist, he also had to be a skilled carpenter. Even though fancy caskets were available from back east, most folks in the West were still buried in simple wooden coffins, which the Undertaker made right here in his shop. Well, what do we have here? Looks like a skull. I reckon this here Undertaker got himself a good sense of humor. Or maybe he just didn't like working alone. Tombstone's Boot Hill Cemetery held a lot of bodies of men who were killed in other towns that didn't have an Undertaker. More often than not, records got lost or grave markers rotted away, and eventually a simple wooden cross is all that would be left of a pioneer of the Old West. Here we have another name in the history of the Old West. We'll never know if he died with blazing six-shooters in a gunfight or was hanged for cattle rustling. Maybe he found the next big silver strike and came back to town to file a claim. If so, he carried his secret to the grave with him, because this here is all that's left of Frank Greevy. The silver dollar is yours, partner, if you can answer this question. Freight companies like this were the lifelines of the West before the Transcontinental Railroad came through. They ran caravans of mule and ox-drawn wagons supplying towns and military posts with necessities from the east. In fact, your ox caravans were known as grass trains, since grass was what them oxen ate. Each of your wagons could carry up to 5 tons of provisions, like food, animal feed, farm tools, and clothing. Moving along stage roads, a wagon train often kicked up dust clouds that could be seen from 20 miles away. And you can bet that an isolated frontier town would be glad to see that cloud a-coming. A person could get a good little look at the rest of the world when they peered through the window of a freight company. That's because anything folks couldn't make locally had to be brought west from the cities in the east, from the blacksmith's anvil to the bags of beans and rice on the storekeeper's shelves. The freight was brought each spring by wagon trains from ports on the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. Those freighters worked mighty hard, moving about 125 bone-breaking miles a week. Animals were fixed up with girths to spread the weight of a wagon's load. Freighters used a motley mix of varmints to haul their wagons, horses, mules, even oxen. So a freight company would keep many sizes and shapes hanging on the wall. The Wells Fargo Stage Company might have had a small office behind this window. Wells Fargo not only took passengers to the smaller towns where railroads didn't go, they also hauled freight. Wyatt Earp might have sat at a desk here, polishing his gun and waiting for the next stage to arrive. Wyatt worked for Wells Fargo, riding shotgun before he became a U.S. Marshal. Some people say Wyatt was paid so that the Earp brothers wouldn't rob the stagecoaches themselves. The fellow who walked through this door might have been on his way to making a fortune. Wagon freighting was a high-stakes gamble. Most freighters stayed poor, but those who won made it in spades. Say a freighter had 25 wagons, each carrying around 7,000 pounds of freight. Say he freighted between Nebraska City and Utah. He'd pay out about $500,000 to get there. But then he'd turn around and sell his freight for nearly twice what he paid. Can't sneeze at that, can you? To stay competitive in a growing town like Tombstone or Dodge City, shops had to offer a good selection of what folks needed at lower prices than anyone else. Like a trading post offering quality dry goods such as clothing, home supplies, and canned food. In fact, two gentlemen by the names of Ward and Montgomery took this concept to new heights, and in the early 1890s became none other than Montgomery Ward. Hard to tell what's in here, but it could be salt, which was real important for lots more than making things taste good. When Wyatt was out there in Kansas killing buffalo, he'd more than likely had a big sack of salt to sprinkle on the hides so they wouldn't rot. Hard to tell what's in here, but it looks like this bin has potatoes in it. Mostly potatoes got dug up in the fall and stored in pits under the ground called root cellars. They'd keep real good down there because they wouldn't get wet or freeze. The store got them in 100-pound sacks, probably lots of sacks at once, and tried to keep them where they wouldn't get soft and mushy or start growing eyes. In the early summer, the special treat is new potatoes, which are young and fresh, with real tender skins. Well, you all know how important mops are, especially out here in the dry country. Everything's got a film of dust on it all the time. There's dry mops and wet mops. Folks also had brooms, which were made out of corn husk or scrub brush growing outside their doors. The keeper of this here dry goods store was one of the most vital and respected people in town. Now, unlike the blacksmith or saddle maker, that wasn't on account of having any special skill. Rather, it was because this store provided so many of the local folks' daily needs. Depending on how much was in your pocket, you could buy everything from Bibles to bourbon, from cradles to coffins. You'd find flour and beans, sugar and spice, pots and pans, candles and tobacco, fabric, shoes, hardware, tools, you name it. Take a look around. You'll see what I mean. Most people brought their pots and pans with them when they came, but things wear out. If you were a poor miner and then struck it rich, this is where you come to get all the extras. When Wyatt set up housekeeping with Josie, she most likely had to buy some of these things, since Maddie, Wyatt's wife, surely kept what she and Wyatt had shared. Paper was a luxury, expensive, about 55 cents a ream, and hard to get. So, the kids in the local school used these slates to do their lessons on. They cost only about 5 cents and could be used over and over again, as long as you didn't drop them or break them. Slate is a kind of rock that splits apart in flat sheets, and it's a nice dark color, so the chalk shows up real well on it. There weren't a lot of books around either, so about all you had to carry to school each day was your slate and your lunch bucket. Everybody drank coffee, even the children, so cups were valued. The tin ones were the best because they didn't break. They've got a coating on them so they won't rust, which is good because nobody wants to drink out of a rusty cup. Since there wasn't electricity, the only way to see at night was either with candles or lanterns. The lanterns burned kerosene, which smelled a little, but if the wick was trimmed right, with not too much of it sticking up, the lamp burned real clean. With a polished metal reflector behind it, it made a pretty good light. Lots better than a candle. This is an ancient Chinese device that was real popular with the storekeepers all over the West because it was sort of the first calculator. Much quicker and more accurate than doing it in your head or even on paper. Since most everything came loose by the barrelful, folks had to have a way to carry the smaller amounts home. So, if you bought 5 or 10 pounds of beans, the storekeeper would wrap it up in this paper. You'd have to be pretty good at it, too, because you'd be awful mad at him if your package broke open on the way home. Here we have a variety of things. The jars hold preserved food like meat, fish, and maybe some vegetables. Canned goods weren't widely used yet. There might be some extra fancy items here too, like jam or raisins or a box of coconut. This here cabinet has a bit of everything, including some little boxes of medical remedies. Things like the laudanum that Wyatt's wife Mattie took for her headaches, about 20 cents for a big bottle. It also looks like there might be a box of nerve builder, but Wyatt didn't need any of that. And maybe some stomach restorer. The storekeeper used the cash register to ring up sales. Ringing up a sale comes from the bell that dinged when the cash drawer opened. That bell was called a thief catcher because the owner could tell anytime someone was dipping in the till. Candy was real popular, and not just with the kids. These jars held lots of different kinds to choose from, like licorice, lemon drops, and gumdrops. You could get 5 pounds for 30 to 50 cents, so you see why it was called penny candy. These bags of flour are kind of unusual because most things aren't packaged up like this. Most likely there's loose flour in a bin or a barrel somewhere else in the store. Flour sacks were special all by themselves, because you could make things out of them, like shirts. Since Wyatt liked fancy white shirts, you can be pretty sure he didn't have any made from flour sacks. Dish towels, baby diapers, curtains, just about anything you can think of were also made from flour sacks. Everywhere you look, you see storage bins. That's because the store has to keep what they call staples like flour, sugar, rice, and beans in big quantities called bulk. And they need to be kept where they will stay dry, because even in the desert, it rains once in a while. They also want to keep it away from the mice or other varmints. In Wyatt's day, everyone over 12 years old either smoked or chewed tobacco. Back then, they didn't know it would hurt you. Well, I guess I shouldn't say everyone, because ladies didn't, except for some of the saloon girls, and they weren't no ladies. It's kind of hard to see what that sign back there on the wall says, besides public notice, but most likely it says that this establishment is cash and carry only, which means that you pay for things at the time you buy them. But the truth is, the storekeeper just wished it was that way. Most times he had to give credit to cattlemen who would pay as soon as they sold their herd, to miners whose pay dirt was being hauled east by the freight company, or to a poor widow whose children were hungry. And sometimes he was holding money for someone else, kind of acting like a banker. Lots of times he traded, too. When Wyatt was hunting buffalo in Kansas, likely he traded the hides and meat in a local store like this one, getting things like horseshoes, flour, or a saddle blanket in exchange. The pot-belly stove might be called the most important meeting place in town. People gathered there to gossip, get warm, and play cards. The scale was used for so many things you might think that the store would have to shut down if something happened to it. Everything got weighed. Flour, rice, beans, butter, meat, candy. not just the stuff going out the door. If the storekeeper was bartering for something, he'd have to weigh it to see what he'd give for it. These bins are full of soap, like face soap, laundry soap, shaving soap for everything you can think of. But there ain't no powdered soap like we have now. It all came in bars, wrapped in paper. Hard to tell what's in here. Maybe it's onions or more beans. Or it might be salt pork, which goes in beans, soup, lots of other food, and melts it up real good for flavorful cooking grease. Salt itself was mighty important in the Old West because it's a preservative. That means it keeps things from spoiling. They didn't have no refrigerators, and there weren't many ice boxes, ice being pretty hard to come by in that hot, dry country. So meat came packed in salty water called brine. And salt pork, bacon, and ham were salted real heavy and kind of dried out. Even butter was salted to keep it from getting sour so fast.
Typically, the storekeeper's family lived just above or behind the store. That made it kind of hard to forget about work when you went home, wouldn't you say, partner?
I got you a silver dollar if you can answer my question true.